Hello and welcome all. Welcome to this quick update. All right, so if you have been following us, we have been sharing, updates as best as we can in the context of, Jolyan Silvera. All right, so today was the sentencing and we were live just, bringing that, but this is just a quick update to let you know that Mr. Jolyan Silvera has been sentenced to 20 years and 10 months in prison for the November 10, 2023 killing of his wife, Melissa Silvera. All right, so the sentence, of course, was handed down by Chief Justice Bryan Sykes in the Supreme Court, all right, earlier today. But can I tell you, I felt like I was in a class, and I am hoping that a lot of people were able to just listen to what was happening. I hope, students, whether you're doing your law in sixth form or law, you were tuned in, just listening. I appreciate the fact that, and I'm not sure if it's because he knows that this is being broadcast live, but he was breaking down the legal terms, and so just the ordinary man could definitely understand his decision and his line of reasoning. So for this live, I'm just giving you a quick update. Stick and stay with us, because later we'll get to open the phone line and talk about the sentence that was handed down. So just to also point out that Mr. Silvera was sentenced to 20 years for manslaughter and 20 years and 10 months for using a firearm to commit manslaughter, and the sentences will run at the same time, so concurrently. So what happens here is that when just watching what was happening, and I guess later we'll talk, and perhaps I've mistakenly said 20 years in that life, but it's really the longer of the two that he will serve, which is 20 years and 10 months. But Mr. Silvera will be eligible for parole after serving a minimum of 13 years. All right, so just to point that out to you, the judge, in fact, took into consideration a number of events, and I guess we could just call them aggravating factors. So, aggravating factors, as I've been sharing, they will add time, and mitigating factors, they will take away, all right, from the time. And so, in that context, in the context of just the starting point, he started at 25 years. And I want to also point out, because I was wondering, I'm like, he cannot get less than 20 years, because after going back and check today, I recognize that the statutory or mandatory minimum in the context of a firearm offense was 20 years. But as I said, Justice Sykes, he brought us to class, and there were obviously, what I will say, some controversies, if you want, in the context of this firearm mandatory minimum, 20 and 25 being the maximum, because he shared some really good points in the context where looking at firearm used to commit an offense that resulted in death, you have to view it from a more serious lens, as opposed to firearm that is used to, let's say, commit a robbery, but perhaps there wasn't a loss of life. Then he was saying, well, it can be 20, the same minimum, so obviously he's also saying to lawmakers, parliamentarians in the legislature, like, you need to perhaps look at this, because this isn't right. And so he was trying to navigate these contexts where I would say perhaps that is not as clear. He went all the way and he looked at different laws in different countries, jurisprudence prudence. So in that context, I think he relied a lot on the Trinidadian context, and so he pretty much kind of used that in his reasoning. But he looked at Cayman, Belize, all right, got 20 years and 10 months, all right, in the context of all that has happened, but he will be eligible for parole after 13 years. And based on the sections that he read from the concerning eligibility for parole, right, there was pretty much from what I've heard, the minimum, it cannot be less than 10 years. And I think the maximum, there has to be some gap between the minimum and the maximum, right? And so I was thinking that perhaps he would have gone to like 12 years, but he went to 13 years in that context. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, what has happened. So again, the judge, I think he was very clear. I'm not talking about the decision yet, if I agree or not agree, but he was very clear in the context of how he has arrived at this particular sentence. And might I add that he pretty much adjourned the court without even thinking about the parole. Somebody from the floor reminded him about, parole and eligibility for parole, and then he went back and then looked at the act and then decided that, hey, we're going to do 13 years. But there are a lot of things that perhaps we need to talk about, and so we'll try our best to review that. So we'll have it on screen, we'll talk about it, and pause as we go along, just to get a sense of some of the views, and just as real, just regular people listening and forming an opinion on that. So that was pretty much it, just from the little that I've heard from I believe it was a cousin of Melissa, that they were pretty much okay with the sentencing. Perhaps not as okay with the eligibility for parole, but again, if it is in the act, then what can they do? Because I was thinking that maybe he's not going to go 10. I was thinking 12, but he went a little higher. So again, we'll talk about just our views on different points in this matter. But I think he was just clear about his process. And again, I learned a lot from this live streaming, and I hope that this can continue so that we can learn some more. But you do the crime, I guess you do the time, right? And so that's the situation right now. Mr. Silvera is definitely going to face time in prison for the crime that he has committed. And I hope that, the family, they will get some closure in this matter. They can start their process of healing. The children, will keep them, of course, in our prayers, and we were informed that they have started counseling. So we hope that the supports will help them. But I mean, if let's say one of the child is 10, 13 years, perhaps not until 23 before you have that father figure back with you. So guys, take what you may from this, but it's sometimes it's easier to just walk away. Peace and love, everyone, and I guess we'll talk to you guys soon. All right, bye for now.